Hello viewers, myself is Dr. Neeta and you are watching my channel Learn Literature with Dr. Neeta. So let us begin today's topic.
So hello dear students, today we will learn about the second part of postcolonialism and we would centralize our discussion on Homi ke Bhabha. He is a famous post-colonial critic. So let us discuss post-colonialism and the famous critic Homi ke Bhabha. Homi ke Bhabha is an Indian-American literary theorist and post-colonial scholar who made a significant contribution to the fields of cultural studies, post-colonial theory and the literary studies. So, he is an Indian-American literary theorist and basically his name is famous in post-colonial studies. He is one of the three exponents of post-colonial theory. There are mainly three critics who are studied in post-colonialism. Number of critics are there, but the three major critics are there. One is Homi ke Bhabha, another is Edward W. Said, and yet another is Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. So, in today's video, we would learn about Homi ke Bhabha's contribution to post-colonial theory. He was born on November 1st, 1949 in Mumbai, India. After completing his master's degree in English literature at the University of Bombay, he earned his DPhil on Joseph Conrad from Christ Church, Oxford. Bhabha occupied academic positions at various prestigious universities including University of Chicago and Harvard University. So he is a very learned man and his ideas are famous internationally as far as the post-colonialism is concerned. These are his famous works of Mimicry and Man, The Ambivalence of Colonial Discourse. It was published in 1984 and the things which are there in red color, these are the basic concepts for which he is famous. So the concept of mimicry is from this book. We would learn about these concepts later on in this video. Yet another famous work of Bhabha is Nation and Narration, and it was published in 1990, and the term cultural hybridity is from this book. Yet another in 1994, Location of Culture, and here he has used the terms like third space, hybridity, mimicry, ambivalence. Next work is Culture in Between, and the concept of in between or something like that of hybridity is also there in this work. Remembering Fanon, Self, Psyche and the Colonial Condition. The book was published in 2001 and here the terms like colonialism, identity and resistance were discussed. Yet another book is The Other Question, Difference, Discrimination and the Discourse of Colonialism. Again he is talking about the terms like discrimination, colonial legacy in cultural discourse. Rethinking American History in a Global Age. It was published in 2002 and it is revealing the impact of globalization on historical narratives. And yet another work that is related to theories is The Commitment to Theory. It was published in 2001. So these are the famous works and you should, when you are trying to understand him from the point of view of examination, you must concentrate on the different terms which were given by Homi ke Bhabha in his post-colonial theory or post-colonial studies. Now Homi Bhabha as a post-colonial critic. Bhabha's work was influenced by his predecessor Edward Said. The name of Edward Said, as I told you, is also famous in post-colonial studies and his work Orientalism is quite famous in this field. So, Bhabha was much influenced by the ideas of Edward Said, particularly in the realm of post-colonial theory. His work can be seen as an extension and development of some of the concepts introduced by Said. So, Said in his Orientalism and in his other works has introduced some of the terms or some of the concepts regarding post-colonialism, and Bhabha has extended those concepts or developed those concepts further. So, one by one we would come to know what is expressed by Said and how it is extended or developed by Homi K. Bhabha in his different works. Bhabha agrees with Said's critique of Orientalism, suggesting Western construction of a distorted and essentialized image of the East as exotic, backward and inferior. As all of you know, and if you do not know about Orientalism and Edward Said, so go through the video in this channel about Orientalism and Edward Said. So, Edward Said in his famous work Orientalism has propounded the idea that West has constructed a distorted and essentialized image of East as backward and inferior. So, there was a kind of cultural supremacy in the West, and they considered themselves to be superior to the people of the East, and the culture of the people of the East was also considered to be inferior in that respect. It was their perception, but Said has criticized this kind of perception. So, Bhabha extends this critique by exploring how colonial discourse constructs the identity of both the colonizer and the colonized. Bhabha has extended the idea and he has explored that in colonial discourse, whatever was going on during the colonial period, the identity of both the colonizer and the colonized was constructed in a particular way. It was not with the colonized only, rather the colonizers were also getting affected by that discourse. He emphasizes the complexity and fluidity of identity in the colonial context. So he was revealing the fact that during the colonial period, West has influenced the East. That is why the people of the East were having their identity constructed in another way, but Bhabha was of the opinion that the process was vice versa. The culture of East was also affecting the West, and that is why their identity was also getting constructed in a particular way. And in this way, he is challenging the essentialist representation, viewing identity as fixed, inherent and based on essential characteristics. So, now the question arises, what is essentialist representation? Essential representation is the kind of representation in which the identity of a person of a particular nation is considered to be fixed, inherent, and it is thought that the personality is constructed merely on the basis of certain essential characteristics. What Bhabha is saying that this is not the right thing to say that there is the essentialist representation of the identity. Rather, the identity is quite a fluid thing and it is getting constructed and reconstructed on the basis of the conditions that are prevailing in that that are prevailing at that time in that nation. It means when the West, people of West were influencing the people of the East, were trying to influence the people of West, they were just instilling their culture here. So it was not a one-way process. Rather, they were also constructing and reconstructing their identities according to the changed condition of the place. Said discussed the ambivalent relationship between the colonizer and the colonized, while Bhabha moves a step further and explores how the cultural interaction results in creation of the new hybrid identities that challenge the fixed categories or the essentialized representation. Ambivalent relationship means that both the parties, the East and the West, both are getting affected by each other. Said was just at this point, but Bhabha moves a step further and he says that these cultural interaction which are going on between the East and the West, they result into a new type of identity also, and he gave the name of hybrid identities to such kind of identities. Hybrid identities means in which the characteristics of both East and West are found. So it is a kind of challenge to the essentialist representation of the identities. Essentialist representation of the identities, as I told you, is a belief that that fixes the categories on the basis of certain characteristics. But he says that such kind of categories cannot be, fixed categories cannot be formed, because the culture of both East and West are interacting and they are producing the hybrid identities. Said's observation of the West exercising its intellectual and cultural dominance over the East was elaborated by Bhabha by examining how power operates in intervening the space of colonial encounters. He gave the concept of the third space in this relation. Not only the identities, but he is also talking about that space, that imaginary space about which he is talking. Said has said that West always tried to dominate East on the basis of its intellectual and cultural powers. But he was not talking about the idea of third space. We would discuss just a few slides later this idea of third space. Said's critique of Eurocentrism, challenging the Eurocentric narratives that have historically dominated academic and cultural discourses, are further developed by Bhabha into the realm of postcolonial cultural studies. So, Edward Said had talked about Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism means the desire of West to overpower East, because the things are analyzed, the things are seen from the Eurocentric perspective. It means Europe or the West is at the center, and accordingly all the narratives were taking shape. This was said by Said, but Bhabha is moving forward and he has studied the effect of culture quite deeply, and when he was discussing the impact of culture, that part is studied in cultural studies. He challenged, like Said, he also challenged the Eurocentric approach. Now, we would learn these terms one by one. First, we would discuss about hybridity. Bhabha's concept of hybridity is particularly relevant in post-colonial context, where different cultural traditions and histories intersect and integrate to evolve new cultural forms and expressions. Bhabha was of the opinion when the two different cultures are coming together, they usually intersect, they integrate, and both of them mingle in such a manner that they evolve a kind of new culture. And as I told you, this concept of new culture or the hybrid culture challenge the fixed categories, the concept of binary opposition and essentialist view of culture. as I told you about the essentialist view of identity, same is the essentialist view of culture. It suggests that there are fixed and timeless qualities that make a culture unique and distinct. It was also thought by the people of the West that their culture is having some timeless qualities, and those qualities make their culture unique and distinct from others. But with this concept of hybridity, he is challenging the thing. He says that the culture of the West, when it is coming in contact with the culture of the East, they are intersecting, they are integrating, and they are developing a third kind of culture, a new cultural form, that is the hybrid form of the culture. As the identities are hybrid, similarly the hybridity can also be felt in the field of culture. Therefore, instead of fixed and essentialized identities, individual and communities may develop hybrid identities that are flexible, evolving, continuously evolving, because the cultures are continuously interacting with each other. That is why the identities are also evolving accordingly, and they are shaped by the interplay of various cultural influences. Bhabha emphasizes that hybridity can be resisted by the colonial powers as it disrupts established norms and fixed identities. So, it was a strategy of the West to overpower the East, and through this, when they were trying to overpower the East, they used their culture as a tool to get domination over the East. So when Bhabha is talking about the hybridity, that both the cultures are interacting with each other and producing a kind of new culture, such an idea, according to Bhabha, can be resisted by the colonial powers. Why? Why it would be resisted by the colonial powers? Because it disrupts the established norms and fixed identities. It would disrupt, it would challenge the idea that there are the fixed identities. It would challenge that there would be a fixed culture which is superior, as the concept of hybridity would disrupt their ideas. That is why the colonial powers resisted this idea of hybridity and can subvert the authority of colonizer. If the people are thinking in this term that there is a hybrid culture or hybrid identity which is with the interaction of the East and West, in such case, if people begin to believe like that, in such case, the authority of the colonizer would be shaken. It can subvert their authority. So, hybridity adds complexity to our understanding of culture. So, we can say that when we are trying to understand culture, this concept of hybridity adds complexity. It acknowledges that cultural forms are not static. As I told you, culture is also a process continuously evolving, or it is also not homogeneous. Not homogeneous means when two cultures are coming together, they would intersect with each other and they would evolve a kind of new culture in which the qualities of both the cultures would be there. So it would be heterogeneous, obviously. So they are not static, they are not homogeneous, but are shaped by the interactions, migrations and historical processes. So these interactions are continuous. People are moving from one place to another continuously, and the historical processes are taking place in which the cultures are intersecting with each other. So we cannot think about the static culture. Hybridity emphasizes the diversity and multiplicity within the culture. So this concept which is given by Homi Ke Bhabha has changed whole of the concept of culture, and it emphasized that the cultures from within are very diverse and having the multiplicity, because the culture that has evolved during that domination of West over the East is having multiplicity. It means it is the product of the various interactions that have taken place at that time. Bhabha extends the concept of hybridity to language and discourse also. He says that this hybridity is not merely limited to identity and culture. Rather, this concept of hybridity can be applicable to the language and the discourse, because the linguistic practices can also be hybrid, making a language a tool for cultural transformation. So when East and West are coming together, a new kind of language is evolving, and in such a way language can also be used as a tool for cultural transformation. And this had happened with us also. When the Britishers were there, they tried to influence our language also. So what happened, a new kind of language in which Hindi and English were mixed together, an English kind of language has evolved, and English at that time was used as a tool for the cultural transformation of Indians when we were under the colonial rule. Hybridity is marked by ambivalence, where cultural forms are simultaneously accepted and resisted. This term was also explained briefly by Edward Said, and Bhabha is also agreeing with that. The concept of is marked by ambivalence. Ambivalence means the thing is at the same time accepted and rejected. So the cultural influences or the Western culture, if we are talking in terms of culture, it was accepted, some part of it was accepted, some part of it was resisted. So hybridity, when we are talking about the hybridity of identity or hybridity of culture or hybridity of language, then this ambivalence would also be there, because whole of the culture of West was not accepted by the East, and whole of the culture of East was not accepted by the West. So there was ambivalence. It means some part of it was accepted, or some cultural elements were accepted while some cultural elements were resisted. So now the idea of third space. Bhabha introduced the idea of third space in his work, The Location of Culture. It is a conceptual space that emerges in betweenness or the contact zone of colonial encounters. Colonial encounters means when the people from the West, or basically the people of England, came to the different countries and they colonized the people. So what happened, there was a third space. This space was not on the earth, it was at the level of concept that emerged. That was the space which we can call in-betweenness, or it was the contact zone. To understand it easily, it was a contact zone. Contact zone was that part where one culture was making contact with other culture. This happened during the colonial encounters. So this contact zone was called the third space. One space you may call, as Western people have called it, they were having their own space, East were having their own space, but the place between them, when both of them are making contact to each other, that was the third space. The third space is neither fully colonizers nor of colonized. We cannot say that the third space was of colonizer. No, colonized were also there. The culture of colonized was also there. The third space was not of colonized, because colonizers' ideas or culture was also there, but it represents a site of cultural hybridization. It means that third space is having the quality of hybridity in it. The third space is a dynamic site for cultural transformation. It is at that place we can feel the cultural transformation as different cultural elements come into contact, disrupting the established norms and power structure, allowing for the emergence of the new hybrid cultural expressions, identities and discourses. It means it was the space where hybridization took place, and in that place the new kind of expression, identities and cultural expressions came to take the form. Bhabha's concept of the third space subverts binary opposition such as colonizer colonized, but the concept of binary opposition was during the colonial period, because the things were divided like that they were the colonizers, they are the colonized, this is center, this is margin. It was prior to the post-colonial theories. The things were understood in binary opposition, but Bhabha's concept of third space or Bhabha's concept of hybridity has broken this concept of binary opposition. It challenges the fixed and hierarchical structure that are often imposed in colonial encounters. Now, yet another term is mimicry. In his essay of Mimicry and Man, Bhabha introduces the concept of colonial mimicry, where colonized subjects imitate or mimic the cultural practices of the colonizers. As India was also a colony, so we can understand it very easily. The people who colonized us were white, they considered themselves superior, and they made all the efforts to make Indians understand themselves superior. So in such case, there were chances, definite chances, that people begin to imitate them so that they may also be considered in the same category. They imitated them or mimic the cultural practices of the Britishers or the colonizer. Now, Bhabha has further defined this mimicry. So he says this mimicry is not a simple replication. Rather, it possesses an element of subversion and irony. It means it was not, this mimicry was not merely to replicate them. Rather, there was a kind of subversion or an ironical attitude towards the colonizer. It reflects the desire for inclusion in the dominant culture. So, there were two desires simultaneously going on in the mind of colonized. They want to include themselves into the dominant culture. At the same time, they want to maintain their cultural autonomy. So, mimicry was there with the purpose so that they may be included in the dominant culture of the white, but simultaneously they were trying to maintain their cultural autonomy, because without maintaining the cultural autonomy, it would not be possible to make their existence possible. The mimicry leads to collapse of the colonizer's authority. When they mimicked in the same manner in which the colonizer were doing the things, it collapsed colonizer's authority and challenged the notion of the fixed colonial identity. Then when they started to mimic in the same manner, so the question of colonizer's identity was just questioned, because now colonial people were not having a fixed identity, because some features of their identity could be seen even in the colonized. So mimicry helps in the emergence of hybrid identities and cultures. So now again he says that mimicry is also a tool with the help of which the hybrid identities and culture was produced. It disrupts binary distinction between the colonizer and colonized. When colonized learn to mimic them, then we cannot say that there is a separate category that the whites would behave in that manner, because now the blacks are also, Indians are also behaving or doing the things in the same manner. So now the binary distinction, the colonized and colonized, was getting disrupted, and a third space was created in that manner that was not fully one nor the other. In Orientalism, Edward Said has talked about that the West considered itself to be one, and we were considered, the Asian countries were considered the other. So now when the people have learned to behave in the same manner, they mimicked in the same manner, so this binary one and other, it has broken. Now yet another term, I have told about it even in the previous slides, is the ambivalence. Ambivalence refers to the simultaneous attraction and repulsion felt by individuals and community in relation to colonial power. So ambivalence is that attitude of the people in which they simultaneously feel attraction as well as repulsion towards the ways and means and culture of the colonial power. Bhabha explores the ambivalence inherent in the colonial encounter. He develops this idea through the concept of mimicry and hybridity. It means these concepts, ambivalence, mimicry, hybridity, essentialist identities, all these terms are interrelated to each other. This ambivalence reflects the complexity of colonial and post-colonial encounter where cultural meaning are challenged. When people were having simultaneously attraction and repulsion towards the colonial power, so the things towards which they were getting attracted, they were accepted by them. The things which were not accepted to them, they were having the feeling of repulsion towards them. So some part of the culture of the West got incorporated into the culture of the East. So the cultural meaning, the idea of the fixed cultural meaning was challenged because of this ambivalence. This concept adds complexity to the analysis of subjectivity and resistance as individuals used to experience conflicting emotion and responses to the colonial legacies. Now, because there was attraction and repulsion towards the culture of the colonial power, and it depended, not all the people were attracted towards some of the qualities and feeling the repulsion towards some other qualities. Rather, it was the subjective wish to get attracted towards particular quality or getting repulsion towards some of them. So because of this concept of ambivalence and hybridity, the concept has become quite complex to the analysis of subjectivity and resistance. It means now the things cannot be expressed in a generalized manner. As individuals used to experience conflicting emotion, so people were having the conflicting emotion and responses to the colonial legacies. That is why the thing has become quite ambiguous to understand at that level. So I think you would be able to understand Homi ke Bhabha at length. Still there are certain other terms which are not so significant, but later even on those terms I would make a video, but still with this much you would be able to go through the post-colonial theory.